Hello, welcome to the Book Cult. Once again, I'll be reading one of my favorite passages from Infinite Jest, beginning on page 81 and going until page 85. One of the reasons the late James Incandenza has been so terribly high on bringing Stitt to ETA was that Stitt, like the founder himself, who'd come back to tennis and later film from a background in hardcore math-based optical science, was that Stitt approached competitive tennis more like a pure mathematician than a technician. Most junior tennis coaches are basically technicians, hands-on, practical, straight-ahead, problem-solving, statistical data wonks, with maybe added knacks for short-haul psychology and motivational speaking. The point about not crunching serious stats is that Stitt had clued Incandenza in, all the way back at a BS 1989 USTA convention on photoelectric line judging, that he, Stitt, knew world tennis was really about not the blend of statistical order and expansive potential that the game's technicians revered, but in fact the opposite. Not order, limit. The places where things broke down, fragmented into beauty. That real tennis was no more reducible to delimited factors or probability curves than chess or boxing, the two games of which it's a hybrid. In short, Stitt and the tall AEC optics man, i.e. Incandenza, whose fierce, flat, serve and haul-ass to the net approach to the game had carried him through MIT on a full ride with stipend, and whose consulting report on high-speed photoelectric tracking the USTA mucks found dense past all comprehending, found themselves totally simpatico on tennis's exemption from stats tracking regression. Were he now still among the living, Dr. Incandenza would now describe tennis in the paradoxical terms of what's now called extralinear dynamics. And Stitt, whose knowledge of formal math is probably equivalent to that of a Taiwanese kindergartner, nevertheless seemed to know what Hopman and Vandermeer and Bollettieri seemed not to know, that locating beauty and art and magic and improvement and keys to excellence and victory in the prolix flux of match play is not a fractal matter of reducing chaos to pattern. Seemed intuitively to sense that was a matter not of reduction at all, but, perversely, of expansion. The aleatory flutter of uncontrolled, metastatic growth, each well-shot ball admitting of n possible responses, n squared possible responses to those responses, and on into what Incandenzo would articulate to anyone who shared both his backgrounds as a Cantorian continuum of infinities of possible move and response. Cantorian and beautiful because infoliating contained is diagonate infinity of infinities of choice and execution, mathematically uncontrolled but humanly contained, bounded by the talent and imagination of self and opponent, bent in on itself by the containing boundaries of skill and imagination that brought one player finally down, that kept both from winning, that made it, finally, a game, these boundaries of self. You mean like the baselines are boundaries? Mario tries to ask. Lieber got nine, with a plosive, disgusted sound. Stitt likes best of all smoke shapes to try to blow rings, and is kind of lousy at it, blowing mostly wobbly lavender hot dogs, which Mario finds delightful. The thing with Stitt, like most Europeans of his generation, anchored from infancy to certain permanent values which, yes, okay, granted, may admittedly have a whiff of proto-fascist potential about them, but which do, nevertheless, the values, anchor nicely the soul and course of a life. Old world patriarchal stuff like honor and discipline and fidelity to some larger unit. Gerhard Stitt does not so much dislike the modern Onanite US of A as find it hilarious and frightening at the same time. Probably mostly just alien. This should not be rendered in exposition like this. but Mario Incandenza has a severely limited range of verbatim recall. Stitt was educated in pre-unification gymnasium under the rather Canto-Hegelian idea that junior athletics was basically just training for citizenship, that junior athletics was about learning to sacrifice the hot, narrow imperatives of the self, the needs, the desires, the fears, the multiform cravings of the individual appetite will, to the larger imperatives of a team. Okay, the state. And, and a set of delimiting rules. Okay, the law. It sounds almost frighteningly simple-minded, though not to Mario, across the redwood table, listening. By learning, in Palestra, the virtues that pay off directly in competitive games, the well-disciplined boy begins assembling the more abstract, gratification-delaying skills necessary for being a team player in a larger arena. The even more subtly diffracted moral chaos of full-service citizenship in a state. Except Stitt says "Ach." But who can imagine this training serving its purpose in an imperialist and waste-exporting nation that's forgotten privation and hardship and the discipline which hardship teaches by requiring? A US of modern A, where the state is not a team or a code, but a sort of sloppy intersection of desires and fears, where the only public consensus a boy must surrender to is the acknowledged primacy of straight line, pursuing this flat and short-sighted idea of personal happiness. The happy pleasure of the person alone, yes? Except, why do you let Delent tie Pemulus and Shaw's shoes to the lines if the lines aren't boundaries? Without there is something bigger, nothing to contain and give the meaning. Lonely. Verstegenheit. Bless you. Any something. The what? This is more unimportant than that there is something. Stitt one time was telling Mario, as they respectively walked and tottered down Calm Ave, eastward into Allston to see about getting a gourmet ice cream someplace along there, that when he was Mario's age, or maybe more like Hal's age, whatever, he, Stitt, had once fallen in love with a tree. A willow that from a certain humid twilight perspective had looked like a mysterious woman aswirl with gauze. This certain tree in the public plaques of some West German town, whose name sounded to Mario like the sound of somebody strangling. Stitt reported being seriously smitten with the tree. I went daily to there, to be with the tree. They respectively walked and tottered, ice cream bound. Mario moving like the one of them who was truly old, mine off his stride because he was trying to think hard about what Stitt believed. Mario's thinking hard expression resembles what for another person would be the sort of comically distorted face made to amuse an infant. He was trying to think how to articulate some reasonable form of a question like, but then how does this surrender the personal individual wants to the larger state or beloved tree or something stuff work in a deliberately individual sport like competitive junior tennis, where it's just you versus one other guy? But then also, again, still, what are those boundaries if they're not baselines that contain and direct its infinite expansion inward, that make tennis like chess on the run, beautiful and infinitely dense? Stitt's thrust and his one great irresistible attraction in the eyes of Mario's late father, the true opponent, the enfolding boundary, is a player himself. Always and only the self out there, on court, to be met, fought, brought to the table to hammer out terms. The competing boy on the net's other side, he is not the foe. He is more the partner in the dance. He is the what. He is the what is the word excuse or occasion for meeting the self. As you are his occasion. Tennis's beauty's infinite roots are self-competitive. You compete with your own limits to transcend the self in imagination and execution. Disappear inside the game. Break through limits. Transcend. Improve. Win. Which is why tennis is an essentially tragic enterprise, to improve and grow as a serious junior with ambitions. You seek to vanquish and transcend the limited self whose limits make the game possible in the first place. It is tragic and sad and chaotic and lovely. All life is the same. As citizens of the human state, the animating limits are within, to be killed and mourned over and over again. Mario thinks of a steel pole raised to double its designed height and clips his shoulder on the green steel edge of a dumpster. Pirouetting halfway to the scent before Stitt darts in to catch him, and it almost looks like they're doing a dance floor dip as Stitt says, "This game, the players are all at ETA to learn. This infinite system of decisions and angles and lines Mario's brothers work so brutishly hard to master. Junior athletics is but one facet of the real gym. Life's endless war against a self you cannot live without." Stitt then falls into the sort of silence of someone who's enjoying mentally rewinding and replaying what he just came up with. Mario thinks hard again. He's trying to think of how to articulate something like, but then is battling and vanquishing the self the same as destroying yourself? Is that like saying life is pro-death? Three passing Alstonian street kids mock and make fun of Mario's appearance behind the pair's backs. Some of Mario's thinking faces are almost orgasmic, fluttery and slack. And then, but so what's the difference between tennis and suicide? Life and death. The game and its own end. It's always Stitt who ends up experimenting with some exotic ice cream flavor when they arrive. Mario always chickens out and opts for good old basic chocolate when the moment of decision at the counter comes. Thinking along the lines of like better the flavor you know for sure you already love. And so, no different, maybe, Stitt concedes. Sitting up straight on a waffle-seated aluminum chair with Mario beneath an askew umbrella that makes the flimsy little table it's rooted to shake and clank in the sidewalk's breeze. Maybe no different, so, biting hard into his tricolored cone, he feels at the side of his white jaw, where there's some sort of red welt, it looks like. Not different. Looking out into the Avs raised median at the Green Line train, rattling past downhill, except the chance to play. He brightens in preparation to laugh in a startling German roar, saying, "No? Yes? The chance to play, yes?" And Mario loses a dollop of chocolate down his chin, because he has this involuntary thing where he laughs whenever anyone else does. And Stitt is finding what he has just said very amusing indeed. I hope you enjoyed that quote or that passage as much as I did. And thank you for tuning in once again. Goodbye.